The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, golden liquid spreading like spilled secrets across the pristine white tiles. Everyone at the launch party turned to stare at me, the girl who just destroyed her own celebration. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know that in exactly 7 minutes, the man standing beside me with that condescending smile would lose everything he'd stolen from me. "You're naive," he'd said just moments before, his hand on my shoulder like a father consoling a child. The recording device in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, holding 3 years of lies, betrayal, and evidence that would change everything. I wasn't the naive one anymore. I was the one holding all the cards, and he didn't even know the game had already ended. The conference room fell silent as his words echoed off the glass walls. "You're naive." 2 words that should have destroyed me. 2 words that 3 years ago would have made me crumble. But standing there in my simple black dress while he lounged in his $3,000 suit, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Real power. The kind that comes from knowing you're about to flip someone's entire world upside down. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or had someone steal your dreams while patting you on the head like a child, then you need to hear what happened next. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't just success. It's making sure the person who wronged you watches their empire crumble while you stand in the ashes of their deception, completely untouched. My name is Emma Chen, though for 3 years, most people in the tech industry knew me as Derek's assistant, or that girl who follows him around at conferences. I was 22 when I first met Derek Whitman, fresh out of MIT with a computer science degree and a revolutionary app idea that I'd been developing since sophomore year. He was 35, charismatic, with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than old, and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he talked to you. Everyone said I was lucky when he offered to be my business partner. Everyone said I'd hit the jackpot when this successful entrepreneur wanted to help bring my vision to life. Everyone was wrong. The app was called MindBridge, an AI-powered mental health platform that could connect people in crisis with appropriate resources in real time, using predictive algorithms I'd developed based on my thesis work. It wasn't just another meditation app or mood tracker. It was something that could actually save lives, born from my own experience of losing my younger brother to suicide when I was 17. Every line of code contained a piece of my grief, my determination to ensure no other family went through what mine did. Derek knew this. Story. He knew what this meant to me. He used it against me. Our first meeting happened at a startup incubator event in Boston. I was presenting MindBridge to a room of potential investors, my hands shaking as I clicked through slides I'd rehearsed 100 times. The presentation was going well until I reached the technical architecture section. That's when Derek stood up from the back row. "Interesting concept," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone turn to look. "But your scalability model is fundamentally flawed. You're looking at server costs that would bankrupt you within 6 months of launch." The room shifted, investors suddenly looking skeptical. My mouth went dry. After the presentation, as investors filed out without making eye contact, Derek approached me. "You've got something special here," he said, handing me his business card. "The idea is brilliant, but you need someone who understands the business side. I've launched 7 successful startups. I can help you make this work." I should have seen the red flags, the way he insisted on being CEO while I remained CTO. The way he gradually took over all investor meetings, saying my technical explanations were too complex for venture capitalists. The way he started referring to MindBridge as our baby when he hadn't written a single line of code. But I was young, inexperienced, and honestly, I was scared. Scared that without him, my brother's memory would remain just that, a memory instead of becoming something that could help millions of people. So I signed the partnership agreement he drafted, giving him 51% of the company because he said investors needed to see strong leadership. The first year was actually good. Derek brought in funding, $2 million in seed money from his connections. We hired a small team, refined the platform, ran successful beta tests. Users were calling MindBridge life-changing. Mental health organizations were reaching out for partnerships. Everything I dreamed of was happening. Derek would parade me around at conferences, introducing me as the brilliant mind behind the technology, always with his hand on my back, guiding me, controlling where I went and who I talked to. I told myself this was just how business worked. I told myself I was learning from the best. The shift happened gradually. First, it was small things. My name disappeared from press releases, replaced with the MindBridge team. Then Derek hired his nephew, Justin, as senior technical advisor, even though Justin's coding experience consisted of a 2-week boot camp. Suddenly, I needed Justin's approval for any technical decisions. "It's about building consensus," Derek explained when I protested. "Investors like to see multiple technical voices." When I pointed out that Justin had approved a code change that crashed our servers for 6 hours, Derek said I was being territorial and not a team player. Then came the gaslighting. Every idea I proposed was shot down in meetings, only for Derek to present the exact same idea a week later as his own breakthrough. When I confronted him privately, he'd look confused. "That was always the plan, Emma. Don't you remember? We discussed this last Tuesday." He'd pull up emails I didn't remember sending, calendar invites for meetings I didn't remember attending. Later, I discovered he had access to my company email and had been sending messages as me, creating a false paper trail. But at the time, I started questioning my own memory. Was I really that stressed? Was I losing track of things? My breaking point came when Derek hired Victoria Sterling as Chief Operating Officer. Victoria was everything I wasn't: blonde, polished, with an MBA from Wharton, and a way of making every sentence sound like a TED Talk. She immediately began restructuring the company, which mainly consisted of moving my desk from the main floor to a converted storage closet they called a focused work environment. In meetings, she'd cut me off mid-sentence. "Let's keep this high level, Emma. We can discuss technical details offline." Offline never came. Slowly, I was being erased from my own company. The worst part was how they made it seem like they were doing me a favor. "Emma's a genius," Derek would tell investors, "but she's not comfortable with the business spotlight. She prefers to work her magic behind the scenes." Victoria would nod sympathetically. "It's actually admirable. Not everyone needs recognition. Emma just wants to help people." They painted me as this selfless, naive girl who was too pure for the harsh business world, while they were the adults protecting me from it. The narrative was so convincing that even I started to believe it sometimes. 6 months after Victoria arrived, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I'd stayed late to fix a critical bug, working in my closet office while the building emptied. Around midnight, I heard voices in Derek's office. The wall between us was thin, another reminder of how far I'd been pushed to the margins. It was Derek and Victoria, and they were drunk. Champagne glasses clinked. "I can't believe she still doesn't know," Victoria laughed. 3 years and she still thinks she owns part of this company." Derek's response made my blood run cold. "The beauty of the structure is that technically, she does own shares in the subsidiary company that owns nothing. The actual IP, the patents, the technology, it's all been transferred to the parent company she has no stake in. My lawyer is a genius." "What happens when we go public next year?" Victoria asked. "She'll figure it out then." Derek's voice was casual, like he was discussing the weather. "By then, it won't matter. We'll give her a nice severance package, sign an NDA, maybe throw in a recommendation letter. She'll take it. She always does what she's told." I sat in the dark, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't type. 3 years of my life. 3 years of 16-hour days, of missed family gatherings, of pouring my soul into code. All of it stolen through legal manipulation I'd been too trusting to see. But the worst part was still coming. "The funniest thing," Derek continued, "is that she actually thinks this app is about helping people. She tells that sob story about her brother at every opportunity. It's perfect for investors. They eat up that emotional backstory. But once we go public, we're pivoting to data harvesting. Mental health data is gold for pharmaceutical companies. We'll make billions selling user information." Victoria laughed again, and she'll never know her precious life-saving app became a data farm. "The naive ones never do," Derek said. "I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, was being perverted into the exact opposite of what I'd intended. The platform meant to protect vulnerable people would be used to exploit them. My brother's memory would be turned into a corporate cash grab. But as I sat on that bathroom floor, something inside me shifted. The sadness transformed into rage, and the rage transformed into something colder, more calculated. They thought I was naive. They thought I was weak. They forgot that I was the one who built the entire platform. They forgot that when you create something from scratch, you know all its secrets. I started planning that night. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional, messy, often self-destructive. Justice is precise, calculated, and devastating in its completeness. The first thing I did was buy a recording device. Not just any device, a high-end one that could pick up conversations from across a room, that automatically uploaded to a cloud server they couldn't access. Then I started documenting everything. Every meeting where my ideas were stolen, every email where Derek contradicted himself, every financial document I could legally access. I became a ghost in my own company, silent and observant, while they grew more comfortable in their deception. The beautiful thing about arrogance is that it makes people sloppy. Derek and Victoria were so convinced of my naivety that they stopped being careful around me. They'd discuss their plans while I was in the room, treating me like furniture. "Emma, be a dear and get us coffee," Victoria would say in the middle of their discussions about hiding assets or manipulating board members. I'd nod meekly, leave the room, and make sure my recorder caught every word. They talked about offshore accounts, about fraudulent financial projections shown to investors, about code they'd stolen from competitors and integrated into MindBridge. Every crime, every lie, every betrayal, I captured it all. 3 months into my investigation, I discovered something that made everything else pale in comparison. While reviewing server logs under the pretense of routine maintenance, I found a hidden partition Derek had created. Inside were 2 sets of books, one showing the company barely breaking even, which he showed to me and the IRS, and another showing millions in profit, which he showed to potential buyers. He was preparing to sell MindBridge to a pharmaceutical giant for $40 million. The deal was already in negotiation. The contracts were being drawn up, and according to the structure he'd created, I would receive nothing, not a single penny from the sale of my own creation. But Derek had made one crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he'd given me administrator access to all the servers because he didn't want to pay for additional IT staff. "You're so good with the technical stuff, Emma," he'd said. "Why waste money on someone else?" This meant I could see everything, including the emails he thought he'd deleted, the files he thought he'd hidden, the trail of deception he thought he'd covered. I found emails where he explicitly discussed defrauding investors, where he admitted to stealing code, where he detailed his plan to force me out before the sale. It was all there, digital breadcrumbs leading directly to his downfall. The recording that would ultimately destroy him came on a Thursday afternoon. Derek had been drinking at lunch, his usual 3-martini client meeting that never involved actual clients. He came back to the office in that dangerous state between buzzed and drunk, where his ego expanded while his filter disappeared. He found me in my closet office, working on what he didn't know was my resignation letter. "Still hiding in here?" he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You know, Emma, sometimes I feel bad for you." I kept typing, letting the silence draw him out. It always did. "You could have been something," he continued. "If you'd been less naive, less trusting, but I guess that's what happens when you grow up sheltered. You think the world operates on fairness and merit." "Is that what you think?" I asked quietly. "That I'm naive?" He laughed, the sound ugly and sharp. Naive doesn't even begin to cover it. You handed me $1 million idea on a silver platter. You literally signed away your rights because I told you to. Do you know how easy it was? How pathetically simple? I didn't even have to try hard to convince you. You were so desperate for validation, so needy for a father figure after your brother died, that you practically begged me to take advantage of you. I forced myself to stay calm, even as his words cut deep. So, you admit you took advantage of me? Derek's drunk brain didn't catch the trap. Took advantage? Emma, I robbed you blind, and you thanked me for it. The company structure, the IP transfer, the hidden accounts, all of it was designed to leave you with nothing. And the best part? It's all perfectly legal because you were too stupid to read what you were signing. You trusted me. He pushed off from the doorframe, stumbling. Slightly. Next month, when the sale goes through, I'll be worth $20 million. Victoria gets $5 million. Even Justin gets $1 million for doing absolutely nothing. And you? You get to keep your little closet office until we don't need you anymore. Maybe another month or two, just to maintain appearances during the transition. And the users? I asked. The people who trust MindBridge with their mental health data? His face twisted into something cruel. The users are products, Emma. Their data is worth more than gold to pharmaceutical companies. Depression patterns, anxiety triggers, medication responses. We're sitting on a treasure trove of information that will make us rich. Your little suicide prevention app is about to become the most sophisticated mental health data harvesting operation in history. That's fraud, I said simply. That's violating user trust and privacy laws. Derek laughed again. Only if someone can prove it. And who's going to do that? You? The naive little girl who can't even stand up for herself in a meeting? You're nobody, Emma. You have no power, no connections, no credibility. Even if you tried to expose this, who would believe you over me? I'm Derek Whitman. I've built 7 successful companies. You're just another 20-something with daddy issues and a sob story. He turned to leave, then paused. You know what the saddest part is? You're still here, still working 60-hour weeks, still fixing bugs, still believing that somehow your hard work will be rewarded. That's not naive, Emma. That's pathetic. After he left, I sat in my closet office for a long time, staring at the recording device that had captured every word. 3 years of my life, reduced to a drunk confession of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. But I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt something else entirely. Relief. Because Derek had just given me everything I needed. His confession, combined with the evidence I'd gathered, wasn't just enough to destroy him. It was enough to destroy everyone who'd participated in this fraud. The board members who'd turned a blind eye, the investors who'd been lied to, Victoria with her manufactured credentials, Justin with his stolen code attributions. They were all implicated. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing my exit strategy with surgical precision. First, I created backups of everything, every piece of evidence, every recording, every document. I stored copies in multiple secure locations, including a safety deposit box, and with my lawyer. Not Derek's lawyer, but my own, one I'd hired secretly using the small savings I'd managed to accumulate. Then I wrote my resignation letter, though resignation doesn't quite capture what it really was. It was a declaration of war disguised as a goodbye. I also did something Derek never expected. I planted a logic bomb in the code. Nothing malicious, nothing that would hurt users or destroy data. Just a simple authentication change that would lock out all administrator access except mine if triggered. It was my insurance policy, set to activate if they tried to access the servers after my departure. After all, I'd built every line of the security infrastructure. I knew every backdoor, every vulnerability, every weakness. They needed me more than they realized, and they were about to find out exactly how much. The night before the launch party, the grand celebration of MindBridge's upcoming sale, I sent an email to someone Derek had forgotten existed. Sarah Chen, my older sister, who happened to be an investigative journalist for the Washington Post. I'd kept her out of my professional life at Derek's insistence. Family and business don't mix, he'd said. What he really meant was that he didn't want anyone who might protect me getting too close. Sarah had been suspicious of Derek from the start, but I'd assured her everything was fine, that I was learning so much, that this was my big break. Reading her response to my email, I knew something was wrong. I'm on the next flight to San Francisco. I felt the first piece of my plan click into place. The launch party was Derek's idea of perfection. He'd rented out the top floor of the Fairmont Hotel, invited every major tech investor in the Bay Area, and hired a team of PR professionals to document what he assumed would be his triumph. The theme was Bridging Minds, Building Futures, my original tagline for MindBridge, now perverted into a corporate slogan. Ice sculptures shaped like neural networks decorated the space. Screens displayed testimonials from users whose lives had been saved by the app, unaware that their savior was about to sell their data to the highest bidder. Derek stood at the center of it all, champagne glass in hand, Victoria at his side in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I arrived late, deliberately. I wanted them to think I might not show up at all. When I walked in wearing a simple black dress I'd bought 3 years ago, the same one I'd worn to my brother's funeral, Derek's eyes flickered with annoyance. "Emma," he called out, loud enough for investors to hear, "our brilliant CTO finally graces us with her presence." The condescension in his voice was thick as honey. Victoria whispered something to him, probably about my appearance. I hadn't styled my hair, hadn't worn makeup. I looked exactly like what they'd painted me as, the awkward tech girl who didn't belong in their polished world. It was intentional. I wanted them to feel superior. Overconfident people make the best targets. "Come here," Derek commanded, gesturing for me to join him at the center of the room. Everyone should hear from the technical genius behind MindBridge. The way he said technical made it sound like a consolation prize. I walked over slowly, aware of every eye on me. These people had millions of dollars invested in MindBridge. They thought they were celebrating a successful exit. They had no idea they were attending a funeral. Derek put his arm around my shoulders, the weight of it familiar and repulsive. "Emma here," he announced to the crowd, "is the reason MindBridge works so flawlessly. She may not be comfortable in the spotlight, but her code speaks for itself." Polite applause, condescending smiles, the typical response to Derek's patronizing introductions. "Would you like to say something?" Derek asked, knowing I usually declined. This was part of his show. Offer me the spotlight, watch me shrink from it, reinforce the narrative of the brilliant but socially inept programmer. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, "I would." The surprise on his face was subtle but delicious. Victoria stepped forward slightly, ready to intervene if I went off script. But what script? They'd never given me one because they never expected me to speak. 3 years ago, I began, I started MindBridge because I lost someone I loved to suicide. My younger brother David was only 15 when he took his own life. He'd been struggling with depression, reaching out for help in ways we didn't recognize until it was too late. The room had gone quiet. This wasn't the polished corporate speak they expected. This was raw, real, uncomfortable. I built MindBridge to be the help David never found. Every algorithm, every feature, every line of code was written with one goal: to ensure no other family experienced what mine did, to create a bridge between those suffering in silence and the help they desperately need. I paused, looking directly at Derek. That's why what happens next is so important. Derek's smile tightened. "What Emma means," he interjected, "is that the sale to PharmaCorp will allow us to expand our reach, to help millions more people." "Is that what I mean?" I asked, my voice carrying across the silent room. "Or do I mean that selling users' mental health data to pharmaceutical companies is a betrayal of everything MindBridge was built to represent?" The silence that followed was deafening. Investors exchanged glances. Victoria stepped forward, her PR training kicking in. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. In fact, everything has been perfectly clear for months now. Derek, you said something to me earlier today that I think everyone should hear." His face had gone pale, but he managed a laugh. "Emma's been under a lot of stress." "You're naive," I said, quoting him. "That's what you said. And then you explained exactly how you've been defrauding investors, stealing intellectual property, and planning to sell user data illegally." I held up my phone. "Would you like me to play the recording for everyone, or would you prefer to confess yourself?" The champagne glass slipped from Derek's hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to break the spell holding everyone in place. Investors started moving closer, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm. Victoria tried to maintain control. "This is obviously a disgruntled employee making baseless accusations." Baseless! I pulled out a folder I'd been carrying. "This contains 2 sets of financial records for Mindbridge, one showing the company breaking even, which Derek showed to me and the IRS, another showing millions in profit, which he showed to potential buyers. That's fraud." I handed copies to the nearest investors. "This USB drive contains recordings of Derek and Victoria discussing how they've structured the company to steal my intellectual property. This email thread shows them planning to sell user data in violation of privacy laws. This code repository proves that Justin, who's listed as senior technical advisor, has never written a single line of code, while my contributions have been systematically erased from the JIT history." Derek found his voice, though it cracked with desperation. "You can't do this. You signed an NDA. You signed contracts." "I signed documents for a subsidiary company that owns nothing," I corrected. "Your lawyer might be clever, Derek, but he's not as clever as you think. The intellectual property transfer you orchestrated? It was never valid because you forged my signature on the critical documents. Yes, I can prove that too. Handwriting analysis and digital forensics are wonderful things." The room erupted. Investors were shouting questions, phones were coming out, and someone was already calling their lawyer. Derek lunged toward me. Whether to grab the evidence or just to intimidate me, I don't know. But Sarah chose that moment to enter with her camera crew. "Mr. Whitman," she said, her press credentials visible. "Sarah Chen, Washington Post. We've been investigating allegations of fraud at Mindbridge for the past 2 weeks. Would you care to comment on the evidence that's just been presented?" Derek froze, caught between me and the camera, his carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. Victoria tried to slip away, but found her path blocked by angry investors demanding answers. Justin, Derek's nephew, was already heading for the exit, but security, alerted by Sarah, stopped him at the door. The party that was supposed to celebrate Derek's triumph had become his public execution. "This is entrapment," Derek sputtered, pointing at me. "She set me up. She illegally recorded—" "California is a 2-party consent state," I said calmly. "But you gave me written permission to record all meetings for quality assurance and training purposes when you hired me. You probably don't remember because you never thought I'd use it against you. Just another document you assumed I wouldn't read carefully." I pulled out the signed agreement, holding it up for the camera. Everything I recorded was completely legal. The transformation in Derek was fascinating to watch. The confident, condescending executive who'd ruled through intimidation and charm was reduced to a cornered animal, eyes darting around the room, looking for any escape route. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising with panic. "Without me, Mindbridge is nothing. I brought in the funding. I made the connections. Emma's just a programmer. She doesn't understand business." "You're right," I agreed, surprising him. "I didn't understand business. I didn't understand how someone could look at a platform designed to save lives and see only dollar signs. I didn't understand how someone could pretend to mentor a grieving young woman while systematically stealing everything from her. I didn't understand how someone could sleep at night knowing they were planning to betray millions of vulnerable users who trusted us with their darkest moments." I stepped closer to him, no longer intimidated by his presence. "But I understand now. And more importantly, everyone else understands too." The head of PharmaCorp's acquisition team, who'd been standing near the bar, approached me. Ms. Chen, is everything you've said tonight accurate? Every word, I replied, and I have documentation to prove all of it. He nodded slowly, then turned to Derek. Our deal is off. PharmaCorp will not be associated with fraud or illegal data harvesting. Expect to hear from our legal team about the misrepresentations you've made during negotiations. One by one, investors began approaching Derek, their faces masks of controlled fury. These were people who'd trusted him with millions, who'd recommended him to others, who'd staked their reputations on his success. The phrase legal action was repeated so many times it became a chorus. But the best moment, the one I'd replay in my mind for years to come, was when Derek turned to me with tears in his eyes, actual tears, and said, Emma, please, we can work this out. We're partners, remember? Think about everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I repeated, letting the absurdity of the statement hang in the air. You mean stealing my company, erasing my contributions, planning to corrupt my brother's memorial into a data harvesting scheme? You're right, Derek. You've done so much for me. You've taught me exactly what kind of person I never want to become. Victoria tried one last manipulation. Emma, think about what you're doing. You're destroying the company. All those users who depend on MindBridge, you're abandoning them. Actually, I said, pulling out my laptop, I've already thought about that. Before coming here tonight, I created a fork of MindBridge's code, the original vision, without any data harvesting capabilities. I've partnered with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline to release it as a free, open-source platform. No corporate ownership, no data selling, just the pure life-saving tool it was meant to be. It goes live at midnight tonight. I turned to address the room, especially the investors. Your investments in the current MindBridge are likely lost. Derek's fraud has made sure of that. But if you're interested in supporting mental health technology that actually helps people instead of exploiting them, I'd be happy to discuss the new platform's nonprofit structure. Several investors immediately expressed interest, but I wasn't done. Oh, and Derek, that authentication change you've been locked out of the servers for the past hour? That's because I retained creator privileges you never knew existed. Every piece of proprietary code you thought you owned, it's been released under an open source license as of tonight. You can't sell what's freely available to everyone. The sound Derek made wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob. It was something primal, the sound of a man watching his empire dissolve into nothing. Security finally arrived, not for me, but for him. Apparently, several investors had already called the SEC about the fraud. As they escorted him out, he turned back one more time. You've ruined everything, he said, his voice broken. You've destroyed 3 years of work. No, I corrected him. I've reclaimed 3 years of work. There's a difference. After Derek was gone, after Victoria had been cornered by investigators, after Justin had been detained for questioning, I found myself standing alone on the balcony, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. Sarah joined me, her camera crew having captured everything they needed. How do you feel? She asked, not as a journalist, but as my sister. Free, I said, and meant it. For the first time in 3 years, I feel free. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Within a week, Derek was facing federal fraud charges, with the SEC, FBI, and IRS all opening investigations. The evidence I'd provided was so thorough, so meticulously documented, that his lawyers advised him to consider a plea deal rather than go to trial. Victoria's involvement led to her disbarment from practicing law. Turns out her credentials were as fabricated as everything else about her. Justin was revealed to have been receiving a salary for work he never did, making him complicit in the fraud. The entire house of cards collapsed, taking down not just the 3 of them, but also several board members who'd knowingly participated in the deception. But the real vindication came from the users. Within days of launching the open-source version of MindBridge, thousands of messages poured in from people who'd been terrified their data would be sold, who'd stopped using the app despite needing it because they couldn't trust corporate mental health platforms. Now, knowing it was protected, nonprofit, and transparent, they came back. Mental health organizations worldwide began implementing the platform, adapting it for their specific communities, improving it in ways I never could have imagined alone. David's memorial had become what I'd always intended, a bridge to help, not a trap for profit. 6 months later, I was invited to testify before Congress about data privacy and mental health technology. Sitting in that chamber, speaking truth to power about the importance of protecting vulnerable users from corporate exploitation, I thought about Derek's words. "You're naive." Maybe I had been. I'd trusted too easily, believed too readily in the good intentions of others. But naivety isn't the same as weakness. Sometimes it takes someone naive enough to believe in doing the right thing to stop those cynical enough to do the wrong thing without hesitation. The open-source MindBridge platform now helps over 10 million users globally, completely free, with transparent data policies and community oversight. I run a small nonprofit that maintains the core code, funded by grants and donations from people who believe mental health support shouldn't come with hidden costs. My office isn't a converted closet anymore. It's a bright, open space where a team of passionate developers work on technology that actually makes a difference. And on my desk, there's a photo of David, no longer a source of pain, but a reminder of purpose. Derek served 18 months in federal prison for fraud, followed by 5 years of probation. He's banned from serving as an officer in any public company for life. The last I heard, he was working as a consultant for a small marketing firm in Ohio, a far cry from his Silicon Valley empire. Victoria relocated to Europe, trying to rebuild her reputation where her disgrace wasn't as well known. Justin went back to school to actually learn programming, though I doubt he'll ever work in tech again. The Whitman name, once golden in startup circles, became synonymous with corporate fraud and betrayal. But this story isn't really about their downfall. It's about what rises from the ashes of deception. Every day, MindBridge prevents an average of 50 suicide attempts. It connects thousands of people to mental health resources they wouldn't have found otherwise. It provides hope in moments of despair, light in the darkness that consumed my brother. That's the legacy that matters. That's the triumph that counts. Derek thought he was stealing a company. He never understood he was trying to steal a mission, and missions can't be stolen. They can only be strengthened by opposition. I learned something crucial through all of this. Being underestimated is actually a superpower if you know how to use it. When people think you're weak, they show you their true selves. When they believe you're powerless, they reveal their crimes. When they assume you're naive, they hand you the very weapons that will destroy them. Derek and Victoria thought they were predators, and I was prey. They never realized that in nature, some prey evolve to become more dangerous than any predator, not through strength or aggression, but through patience, intelligence, and the ability to strike at exactly the right moment. The recording device I bought 3 years ago sits in my desk drawer now, a reminder of the power of truth captured and revealed at the perfect time. Sometimes young entrepreneurs reach out to me, sharing stories of being manipulated or cheated by senior partners. I tell them what I wish someone had told me: document everything, trust but verify, and never let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself makes you difficult. The only thing worse than being called naive is actually being naive enough to let exploitation continue. I still code late into the night sometimes, but now it's in my own space, for my own purpose, building tools that honor my brother's memory the way they were meant to. The closet office they stuffed me into is now a meditation room for employees who need a moment of peace. The conference room where Derek and Victoria plotted my erasure is where we hold survivor support groups. The building that housed so much deception now hosts truth and healing. There's poetry in that transformation, a justice more complete than any legal verdict. Looking back, I realized Derek was both wrong and right about me. I was naive enough to believe that hard work and good intentions would be rewarded, that mentorship meant something sacred, that business partnerships were built on mutual respect. But I wasn't pathetic. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't the supporting character in his success story. I was the author of my own narrative, and when the time came, I wrote him completely out of it. The girl he dismissed as nobody became the architect of his downfall, not through revenge, but through the simple act of revealing truth. The tech world has a short memory for scandals, but a long memory for innovation. MindBridge is now studied in computer science programs as an example of ethical technology development. My story is taught in business schools as a cautionary tale about the importance of proper documentation and the dangers of underestimating technical founders. But more importantly, thousands of families still have their loved ones because a platform designed with genuine care continues to operate with genuine purpose. That's the victory that matters. That's the success that counts. Sometimes I wonder if Derek ever truly understood what he lost. Not just the money or the reputation, but the opportunity to be part of something genuinely meaningful. He could have been remembered as someone who helped save lives, who supported a grieving young woman in creating something beautiful from tragedy. Instead, he's a footnote in a story about corporate greed, a cautionary example of how ambition without ethics leads to ruin. He reached for millions and ended up with nothing. I gave away everything and gained the world. The last time we spoke was during his sentencing hearing. He was allowed to make a statement, and he used it to apologize, not to me, but to the investors he'd defrauded. Even facing prison, he couldn't acknowledge what he'd truly done wrong. After the hearing, his lawyer approached me with an offer. Derek would pay me $10 million if I agreed not to write or speak publicly about what happened. $10 million for my silence. 3 years ago, I would have been tempted. 3 years ago, I might have taken it. But standing there in that courthouse, I realized silence was exactly what allowed Derek to thrive for so long. Silence from employees too scared to speak up. Silence from board members who saw the red flags but ignored them. Silence from a young woman who thought enduring abuse was the price of success. Tell Derek, I said to his lawyer, that my voice is not for sale. Not for 10 million, not for 100 million. The truth deserves to be heard, and I'm going to keep telling it. The lawyer seemed surprised. You're turning down $10 million just to be able to talk about this? No, I corrected him. I'm turning down $10 million to ensure people like Derek never feel safe exploiting others again. My story might be the warning that saves the next naive young founder from falling into the same trap. That's worth more than any amount of money. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt the last chains of Derek's influence break away. He had no more power over me, not through intimidation, not through money, not through the narrative he'd tried to construct. I was free to tell my story, to own my truth, to continue building the legacy I'd always envisioned. The girl he'd locked in a closet had emerged into the light, and no amount of corporate manipulation could force me back into the shadows. Today, when I mentor young founders, I tell them the whole story, not to scare them, but to prepare them. The tech world is full of Derek Whitmans, charming predators who see passion and mistake it for weakness, who view trust as an invitation to exploit. But it's also full of genuine innovators, ethical leaders, and people who understand that true success comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. The key is learning to tell the difference, and that requires wisdom that often comes from painful experience. I've been offered positions at major tech companies, venture capital firms, and prestigious universities. I've turned them all down. My work is with MindBridge, with the nonprofit that ensures it remains free and ethical, with the community of developers and mental health professionals who've made it better than I ever could have imagined alone. This isn't just a job or a company, it's a mission, a memorial, a promise kept to a brother who never got to see what his sister would become. Every line of code is a love letter to David. Every user saved is a victory he shares. Every moment of this journey, painful as it's been, has been worth it for that alone. The irony is that Derek was right about one thing: I was naive. But naivety, when combined with determination, documentation, and the courage to speak truth at the right moment, becomes something far more powerful than cynicism. It becomes justice. It becomes transformation. It becomes the kind of story that reminds people why we fight for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible, even when the powerful seem untouchable, because they're not untouchable. They're human, flawed, and ultimately vulnerable to the one thing they never expect from those they underestimate: the truth, delivered with perfect timing and irrefutable evidence. As I stood at that launch party, watching Derek's world crumble with each revelation, I realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years trying to erase me, to minimize me, to reduce me to nothing more than a naive girl with a sad story. But in doing so, he'd actually created something he never intended: a survivor, a fighter, someone who understood that true power doesn't come from titles or equity shares or corner offices. It comes from knowing your worth, documenting your truth, and choosing the perfect moment to reveal both to the world. The champagne from that shattered glass has long since been cleaned up, but the impact of that night continues to ripple through the tech industry. Founders are more careful about documentation. Investors are more diligent about investigating company structures. Young entrepreneurs are more aware of the warning signs of exploitation. My story became a catalyst for change, proof that one voice, armed with evidence and courage, can bring down an empire built on lies. Derek thought he was building a fortune. Instead, he built his own downfall, brick by brick, lie by lie, never realizing that the foundation was being documented by the very person he dismissed as powerless. 3 years ago, I walked into that startup incubator with nothing but an idea and a desperate hope to honor my brother's memory. I was young, inexperienced, and yes, naive, but I was also brilliant, determined, and driven by purpose rather than profit. Derek saw the first set of qualities and thought he'd found the perfect victim. He never saw the second set, the ones that would ultimately destroy him. That blindness, that arrogance, that complete inability to see me as anything more than a tool for his enrichment, that was his real weakness. And in the end, it cost him everything. The MindBridge story has been optioned for a documentary with proceeds going to mental health charities. Universities invite me to speak about ethical technology development. Congress calls me to testify about data privacy. But the moments that matter most are the quiet ones. The emails from users saying the app saved their life. The messages from families reunited with loved ones who found help in time. The statistics showing declining suicide rates in communities where MindBridge is widely used. These are the victories Derek never understood, the rewards that can't be measured in stock options or acquisition prices. Sometimes late at night when I'm coding new features or reviewing community contributions to the platform, I think about that closet office. It was meant to diminish me, to literally box me in and make me small. But in that tiny space, surrounded by the evidence of my erasure, I planned the restoration of everything they tried to steal. Every humiliation became fuel. Every dismissal became determination. Every "you're naive" became another piece of evidence in the case I was building. Derek gave me the perfect environment to plan his downfall, isolated, underestimated, and with complete access to everything I needed to document his crimes. The truth about power is that it's not about having it, it's about knowing when and how to use it. For 3 years, I had more power than Derek ever realized. The power to build and maintain the entire technical infrastructure he depended on. The power to document every crime he thought he was committing in secret. The power to choose the perfect moment to reveal everything. He mistook my silence for submission, my patience for passivity, my kindness for weakness. These misunderstandings became the rope he used to hang himself, metaphorically speaking. Every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture, every crime committed in my presence because he'd forgotten I was human, they all became evidence in the case that destroyed him. I still have the recording of that final confession, the one where Derek admitted to everything while drunk on his own arrogance. Sometimes I play it, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder. A reminder that no matter how powerful someone seems, no matter how untouchable they appear, truth has a way of surfacing. Justice has a way of arriving, even if it takes time. And those who are underestimated, dismissed, and discounted often become the agents of that justice, simply by refusing to accept the narrative others try to impose on them. The new Mindbridge headquarters has a wall of photos, images sent by users whose lives were saved, families reunited, people who found hope in their darkest moments. Derek's portrait used to hang in the old office, a monument to his ego. Now that space is filled with thousands of small photos, creating a mosaic that, when you step back, forms the image of a bridge, not a bridge between minds and profit, but between despair and hope, isolation and connection, ending and beginning. It's what Mindbridge was always meant to be, what it became once the corruption was cut away. Young founders sometimes ask me if I regret anything about those 3 years. The truth is, I regret trusting Derek. I regret not seeing the warning signs sooner. I regret the months of self-doubt, the times I questioned my own memory and judgment because of his gaslighting. But I don't regret the experience itself. It taught me lessons no MBA program could provide. It showed me the importance of documentation, legal literacy, and maintaining evidence. It revealed the power that comes from being underestimated. Most importantly, it proved that integrity and intelligence will always triumph over deception and greed, even if that triumph takes time to manifest. The phrase "you're naive" has become something of a calling card for me now. When someone says it, trying to dismiss or diminish me, I smile, because I know what they don't, that my supposed naivety is actually carefully cultivated strategy. Let them think I'm harmless. Let them reveal their true selves while believing I'm too simple to understand. Let them hand me the very weapons I'll use to dismantle their deceptions. Derek taught me the power of being underestimated. He just never expected to be the victim of the very lesson he provided. In the end, this isn't just a story about corporate fraud or startup culture or even justice. It's a story about the power of purpose over profit, truth over deception, and patience over impulse. It's about a young woman who refused to let her brother's memory be corrupted into a corporate cash grab. It's about the thousands of people alive today because a platform remained true to its mission despite attempts to pervert it. It's about the beautiful irony of someone dismissed as naive, orchestrating the complete downfall of those who underestimated her. Derek Whitman thought he was the protagonist of this story, the successful entrepreneur who discovered and developed a naive young programmer. He cast himself as the hero, me as the sidekick, and Mindbridge as his ticket to wealth. But stories have a way of revealing their true protagonists, and heroes are defined not by their own perception, but by their actions and impact. The real story was never about Derek building an empire. It was about Emma Chen honoring her brother's memory and protecting vulnerable people from exploitation. The real story was about truth emerging from shadows, justice rising from oppression, and a young woman discovering that being underestimated is the most powerful position from which to strike. As I write this, sitting in my office, a real office with windows and dignity, I can see the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. It's a different kind of bridge than the one I built with code, but the symbolism isn't lost on me. Bridges connect separated spaces, allow passage over dangerous waters, and require strong foundations to support the weight they carry. MindBridge does all of this in the digital realm, connecting isolated individuals to help, allowing safe passage through mental health crises, built on the unshakable foundation of genuine care rather than corporate greed. Derek tried to corrupt that foundation, to replace caring with profit, connection with extraction. He failed because some things can't be corrupted if someone is willing to fight for them. The recording device that captured Derek's confession sits in my desk drawer. A small piece of technology that brought down a multi-million-dollar fraud. David would have found that poetic. He always loved stories where the small defeated the mighty, where intelligence triumphed over strength, where patience outlasted aggression. In a way, this victory belongs to him as much as me. His memory gave me the strength to endure 3 years of humiliation. His loss gave me the purpose to keep fighting when surrender would have been easier. His spirit, encoded in every line of MindBridge, ensured that the platform would survive attempts to corrupt it. Sometimes I receive messages from other founders who've experienced similar exploitation. They share stories of stolen ideas, manipulated contracts, and senior partners who saw them as resources to be extracted rather than humans to be respected. I always respond with the same advice. Document everything, trust, but verify. Know your legal rights, and never let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself makes you difficult. Being difficult is sometimes the only way to prevent being victimized. Being naive doesn't mean being powerless. It just means you haven't yet learned to weaponize the assumptions others make about you. The tech industry has slowly begun to change, partly because of stories like mine being shared more openly. Accelerators now provide legal education alongside technical mentorship. Investors are more careful about company structures that disadvantage founders. Young entrepreneurs are more aware of the warning signs of exploitation. It's not enough. There are still Derek Whitmans out there, still predators looking for naive prey to exploit. But each story shared, each fraud exposed, each victory of truth over deception makes the hunting ground a little smaller, the prey a little wiser, the consequences a little more severe. I've kept one thing from the old MindBridge office, the nameplate from my closet door. Emma Chen, CTO, in small, tarnished letters, a reminder of how small they tried to make me. It sits on my bookshelf now, not as a symbol of humiliation, but as a trophy of war. Every time I see it, I remember that the space they gave me didn't define my worth. The title they granted didn't limit my power. The narrative they created didn't determine my story's ending. I was never just the naive girl in the closet. I was the architect of their downfall, hiding in plain sight, documenting their crimes while they dismissed me as irrelevant. The most satisfying part of this entire experience wasn't watching Derek get arrested, or seeing Victoria's career destroyed, or even reclaiming MindBridge for its original purpose. It was the moment, standing in that ballroom surrounded by shattered champagne glass and shattered dreams, when Derek finally saw me for who I really was. Not the naive girl he'd manipulated for 3 years, but the woman who'd orchestrated his complete destruction with patience, intelligence, and irrefutable evidence. The look in his eyes, shock giving way to understanding, giving way to defeat, was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured. He finally understood that he'd never been the predator in this story. He'd always been the prey, too arrogant to realize he was being hunted by someone he'd taught exactly how to destroy him. "You're naive," he'd said, like it was an insult, like it was a weakness, like it was the reason he could exploit me without consequence. But naivety, properly wielded, is a weapon more powerful than any corporate manipulation or legal maneuvering. It allows you to see the world as it should be rather than accepting it as it is. It gives you the courage to fight battles others consider unwinnable. It provides the moral clarity to know that some things are worth sacrificing everything to protect. My naivety about business became my strength in seeking justice. My trust in the good of others became my ability to recognize and document evil. My belief that hard work should be rewarded became my determination to ensure that it finally was. The new mind bridge continues to grow, not in valuation or profit margins, but in lives saved and families preserved. Every success story shared by users is a vindication of the choice to keep it free, open source, and focused on its original mission. Derek wanted to sell user data for millions. Instead, that data remains protected, used only to improve the platform's ability to help those in crisis. He wanted to make $20 million from the acquisition. Instead, he lost everything while the platform he tried to corrupt helps millions for free. There's a poetic justice in that reversal, a balance restored to a universe that had seemed tilted in favor of exploitation. I sometimes wonder what my brother would think of all this. David was gentle, kind, the sort of person who found confrontation physically painful. Would he approve of how I fought back? Would he be proud of what I've built from the ashes of his loss? I think he would understand that sometimes gentleness must be set aside to protect what matters. Sometimes kindness means preventing others from being hurt. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is ensure that a memorial remains pure, uncorrupted by greed, true to its original purpose of preventing other families from experiencing the same loss. The last entry in my journal from those dark days at Mindbridge, written the night before the launch party, simply says, "Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, the truth comes out. Tomorrow, David's memory is protected forever." Reading it now, I'm struck by how calm I was, how certain. 3 years of humiliation had led to that moment, and I knew with absolute clarity that justice was about to be served. Not because I hoped for it or wished for it, but because I'd engineered it with the same precision I used to build Mindbridge's algorithms. Every variable accounted for, every contingency planned, every possible escape route blocked. Derek never stood a chance because he never saw me coming. The story could end here, with justice served and Mindbridge restored to its mission. But that wouldn't be the complete truth. The complete truth is that this experience changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm less trusting now, more careful with contracts and partnerships. I document everything, even casual conversations, because I know how easily words can be twisted. I'm successful by any measure, running a nonprofit that helps millions, respected in the tech community, financially secure from consulting and speaking engagements. But I'm also marked by those 3 years, carrying scars that aren't visible but are very real. Sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m. convinced I'm back in that closet office, that the victory was just a dream, and Derek is still controlling everything. It takes a moment to remember that it's over, that he's gone, that Mindbridge is free. The trauma of gaslighting doesn't disappear just because justice is served. The confidence stolen by years of being diminished isn't instantly restored by one moment of triumph. Recovery, like justice, is a process rather than an event. But each day gets a little easier, each success feels a little more real, each moment of helping someone through Mindbridge heals a piece of what Derek tried to break. I've started dating again, something that seemed impossible during those 3 years when I could barely trust my own judgment. His name is Marcus. He's a teacher, completely unconnected to the tech world, and he makes me laugh in ways I'd forgotten were possible. When I told him the whole story on our 5th date, expecting him to run from the complexity and trauma of it all, he simply said, "You're the strongest person I've ever met. And Derek was an idiot for underestimating you." It was exactly what I needed to hear, not sympathy or pity, but recognition of strength, acknowledgement of victory, understanding that surviving and thriving despite exploitation is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. The future stretches ahead, full of possibility that seemed impossible 3 years ago. Mindbridge continues to evolve, with contributors from around the world adding features, improving algorithms, adapting it for different cultures and communities. I'm working on a book about ethical technology development, turning hard-learned lessons into guidance for the next generation. There's talk of a foundation in David's name, providing mental health resources to underserved communities. None of this would have been possible if I'd accepted Derek's narrative, if I'd believed him when he called me naive and meant it as an insult. Because here's what Derek never understood. Being naive isn't about being stupid or weak. It's about maintaining hope despite evidence to the contrary. It's about believing in the possibility of good, even when surrounded by bad. It's about refusing to become cynical just because cynicism seems safer. My naivety survived 3 years of exploitation, emerged intact from systematic gaslighting, and ultimately became the force that brought down a multi-million-dollar fraud. If that's naive, then I'll wear the label. Proudly, knowing that my naivety accomplished what his cynicism never could, creating something that actually helps people, building a legacy that actually matters, honoring a memory in a way that actually makes a difference. The recording of Derek's confession has been requested by multiple law schools as a teaching tool for contract law and corporate ethics. I've agreed to share it, with proceeds going to mental health charities, because I want every future lawyer and executive to hear the casual cruelty in his voice, the complete lack of conscience as he described defrauding investors and betraying users. I want them to understand that this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated pattern of exploitation. I want them to hear him call me naive and understand that he was really confessing his own blindness to everything that actually mattered. As I finish writing this, the sun is setting over San Francisco, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. From my office window, I can see the city where so many dreams are built and destroyed, where innovation and exploitation often walk hand in hand, where young founders arrive daily with nothing but ideas and hope. Some of them will meet their own Derek Whitmans, face their own battles between purpose and profit, navigate their own journey from naivety to wisdom. I hope they remember that being underestimated is not a weakness, but an opportunity. That documentation is not paranoia, but protection. That standing up for what's right is not naive, but necessary. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, the underestimated assistant, the dismissed founder, the person whose contributions are erased while others take credit, know this: your time will come. Document everything. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself makes you difficult or ungrateful. And when the moment arrives, when you have the evidence and the opportunity to reveal the truth, don't hesitate. Don't feel guilty. Don't second-guess yourself. The people who exploited you never hesitated in their cruelty. You shouldn't hesitate in your justice. Derek Whitman thought he was writing my story, casting me as a minor character in his grand narrative of success. He never realized I was keeping my own record, writing my own version where he was the villain and I was the hero. His story ended with disgrace and downfall. Mine continues with purpose and impact. His legacy is a cautionary tale about greed and exploitation. Mine is millions of people helped by a platform that remained true to its mission. He called me naive, thinking it was an insult. I proved that naivety, armed with intelligence and evidence, is the most powerful force in the world. The champagne has been cleaned up. The shattered glass has been swept away. The party that was supposed to celebrate Derek's triumph has become a legend in Silicon Valley. The night a young woman brought down a corporate predator with nothing but truth and perfect timing. But for me, it's not about the drama or the vindication or even the justice. It's about David, whose memory is now protected forever. It's about the users who trust MindBridge with their darkest moments, knowing their data is safe. It's about proving that purpose can triumph over profit, that truth can defeat deception, that being naive enough to believe in doing the right thing is the greatest strength anyone can have. "You're naive," Derek said, and he was right. I was naive enough to believe that technology should help people rather than exploit them. Naive enough to think that business could be conducted ethically. Naive enough to imagine that a young woman's idea could change the world without being corrupted by greed. That naivety survived his worst attempts to destroy it and ultimately destroyed him instead. If that's naive, then naivety is my superpower, my weapon, my badge of honor. And I'll keep being naive, keep believing in good, keep fighting for what's right, knowing now that naive doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes it means powerful beyond measure. End. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.